First on the list is Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot is one of history's most infamous betrayers, whose name has become synonymous with treachery. As one of Jesus Christ's 12 apostles, Judas held a position of trust and closeness to Jesus. Yet his actions on the night of the Last Supper set in motion one of the most pivotal events in religious history, the betrayal of the Messiah. Judas's betrayal is believed to have been motivated by greed. He agreed to hand Jesus over to the chief priests in exchange for 30 pieces of silver, a paltry sum even by the standards of the time. The Gospel accounts describe how Judas led the soldiers to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus was praying, and identified him with a kiss, a gesture that has since become a chilling symbol of duplicity. The consequences of Judas's betrayal were monumental. Jesus was arrested, tried, and crucified, fulfilling the prophecies of his death and resurrection. For Christians, this act of betrayal paradoxically became a cornerstone of their faith, as it led to the redemption of humanity through Jesus' sacrifice. However, Judas's story does not end there. Consumed by guilt, he attempted to return the silver to the priests, but when they refused, he threw the money into the temple and took his own life. This tragic end has been interpreted in various ways, as an act of remorse, a fulfillment of divine prophecy, or even as a cautionary tale about the consequences of greed and betrayal. The legacy of Judas Iscariot is one of complexity. While his actions have been universally condemned, they also highlight themes of free will, divine plan, and the duality of human nature. He remains a central figure in Christian theology, a reminder of both humanity's capacity for betrayal and the possibility of redemption. Next on the list is Marcus Junius Brutus. Marcus Junius Brutus is remembered as one of history's most infamous betrayers, immortalized by William Shakespeare's chilling line, "Et tu, Brute?" Brutus's betrayal of Julius Caesar, a man he once considered a close ally, shook the Roman Republic to its core and changed the course of history. Born into a prominent Roman family, Brutus was initially a supporter of Pompey the Great, who opposed Caesar in the Roman Civil War. After Pompey's defeat and death, Brutus reconciled with Caesar, who forgave him and even appointed him to positions of power. However, as Caesar's influence grew, so did fears that he intended to crown himself king, undermining the ideals of the Republic. Brutus, driven by a sense of duty to protect the Republic, joined a conspiracy of senators who sought to eliminate Caesar. On the Ides of March in 40 BC, Brutus and his fellow conspirators assassinated Caesar during a Senate meeting, stabbing him 23 times. Caesar's alleged final words, "You too, Brutus," symbolized the deep betrayal by someone he trusted implicitly. The aftermath of Caesar's assassination was far from what Brutus and the conspirators had envisioned. Instead of restoring the Republic, their actions plunged Rome into chaos, sparking a series of civil wars. The conspirators were hunted down by Caesar's loyalists, including Mark Antony and Octavian, later Augustus. Brutus's fate was sealed at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE, where his forces were defeated. Rather than face capture, Brutus took his own life, cementing his tragic legacy as a man torn between personal loyalty and political ideals. Today, Brutus is a complex figure, simultaneously condemned as a traitor and admired as a defender of republican principles. His story serves as a cautionary tale of how betrayal, even when motivated by noble intentions, can lead to unforeseen and disastrous consequences. Next is Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold's name has become synonymous with treachery and betrayal in American history. Once a celebrated general in the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War, Arnold's decision to defect to the British remains one of the most infamous acts of betrayal in the nation's history. Arnold was a skilled and courageous leader, playing key roles in battles such as the capture of Fort Ticonderoga and the Battle of Saratoga, which marked a turning point in the war. Despite his military brilliance, Arnold grew increasingly resentful over perceived slights, lack of recognition, and financial struggles. These frustrations, coupled with his wife Peggy Shippen's ties to British loyalists, pushed Arnold to conspire with the enemy. In 1780, Arnold assumed command of the American fort at West Point, strategically located on the Hudson River. Under a secret arrangement with the British, Arnold planned to surrender the fort in exchange for money and a high-ranking position in the British Army. However, the plot unraveled when American forces captured British Major John Andre, who was carrying incriminating documents linking Arnold to the scheme. Arnold narrowly escaped to British-controlled territory, leaving behind a tarnished reputation and a deep sense of betrayal among his former comrades. He was rewarded by the British with a brigadier general commission and a modest pension, but lived the rest of his life in relative obscurity, shunned by both sides. Benedict Arnold's story is a cautionary tale about how ambition, resentment, and disillusionment can lead to actions that overshadow a lifetime of accomplishments. His betrayal not only jeopardized the Revolutionary War effort, but also left a permanent stain on his legacy. Fourth on the list is Mir Jafar. Mir Jafar, a name synonymous with betrayal in Indian history, played a pivotal role in the fall of Bengal to British colonial power. As a high-ranking officer in the Bengal army, his actions during the Battle of Plassey in 1757 changed the course of Indian history forever. Mir Jafar initially served as the commander of Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah's forces, tasked with defending the sovereignty of Bengal against the advancing British East India Company. However, Jafar's ambition for power made him a willing pawn in the British strategy to overthrow Siraj-ud-Dowlah. In secret negotiations with Robert Clive, the British promised to make Jafar the next Nawab of Bengal in exchange for his support during the battle. When the Battle of Plassey began, Jafar's betrayal became evident. His forces withheld their support, allowing the British to secure a decisive victory. Siraj-ud-Dowlah was captured and executed, and Jafar was installed as the puppet Nawab of Bengal. However, Jafar's rule was far from triumphant. The British used him as a figurehead to consolidate their control over Bengal, exploiting its resources and wealth to finance their growing empire. Jafar's inability to meet British demands eventually led to his removal and replacement by another puppet ruler. The consequences of Jafar's betrayal were profound. The British gained a strong foothold in India, marking the beginning of nearly 2 centuries of colonial rule. Bengal's wealth was systematically drained, leading to economic decline and widespread suffering for its people. Mir Jafar remains a deeply controversial figure in Indian history, often remembered as the archetype of treachery and the catastrophic consequences of personal ambition over collective responsibility. Next is Ephialtes of Trachis. Ephialtes of Trachis remains one of history's most notorious betrayers, his actions forever etched into the tragic legacy of the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. This conflict, celebrated as a testament to Greek bravery and resolve, tells the story of King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans holding the line against the overwhelming forces of Xerxes, the Persian king. Their stand has become legendary, a symbol of unyielding defiance against insurmountable odds. However, Ephialtes' betrayal cast a shadow over this tale of heroism, altering the course of the battle and tarnishing his name for eternity. A native of Greece, Ephialtes sought personal gain in a time of national peril. Driven by greed and the lure of Persian gold, he chose to side with the invaders rather than his fellow Greeks. His knowledge of the local terrain became a weapon against his own people when he revealed a hidden mountain path to Xerxes' forces. This secret pass bypassed the Spartan defenses, allowing the Persians to flank the Greek position. What could have been a story of unbroken resistance turned into a desperate last stand due to Ephialtes' treachery. The ramifications of Ephialtes' actions were both immediate and far-reaching. The Spartans and their allies fought valiantly to the very end, demonstrating a courage that has resonated through the ages. Yet their heroic sacrifice could not prevent their encirclement and eventual defeat. The fall of Thermopylae left Greece vulnerable to the Persian invasion, which swept through much of the region in the aftermath of the battle. Although the Greeks ultimately rallied and defeated the Persians in subsequent engagements, the loss at Thermopylae remains a dark and somber chapter in the Greco-Persian Wars. For the Greeks, Ephialtes' name became synonymous with betrayal and cowardice. His treason struck at the heart of Greek ideals of loyalty, unity, and patriotism. Even today, his story is invoked as a cautionary example of how selfishness and greed can undermine even the noblest of efforts. Ephialtes serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact that one act of disloyalty can have, even when set against the backdrop of overwhelming bravery and heroism. His legacy endures, not as a hero, but as a symbol of treachery that forever changed the course of a pivotal moment in history. Coming up is Vidkun Quisling. Vidkun Quisling is remembered also as one of history's most notorious betrayers, whose name has become synonymous with treason. As the head of Norway's puppet government during World War II, Quisling's actions facilitated Nazi Germany's occupation of his country, leaving a lasting stain on his legacy and forever associating his name with betrayal. Quisling was a Norwegian military officer and politician who rose to prominence in the 1930s as the leader of the National Samling National Unity Party, a far-right political movement influenced by fascist ideologies. Despite limited popular support, Quisling sought to align himself with Nazi Germany, believing that Adolf Hitler's regime would secure his political ambitions. When Germany invaded Norway in April 1940, Quisling declared himself the leader of Norway and urged his countrymen to surrender, undermining Norway's resistance effort. During the Nazi occupation, Quisling served as the leader of a collaborationist government, effectively acting as a puppet for the German occupiers. His administration implemented policies aligned with Nazi ideology, including the persecution of Jews and the suppression of political dissent. Under his rule, Norway's Jewish population was rounded up and deported to concentration camps, an act that cemented his reputation as a traitor. Quisling's collaboration with the Nazis was met with widespread condemnation by his fellow Norwegians. The resistance movement grew stronger as citizens refused to accept his leadership, viewing him as a symbol of betrayal and oppression. By the end of the war in 1945, Quisling was arrested, tried for treason, and sentenced to death. He was executed by firing squad on October 24, 1945. Today, Quisling's name lives on as a term for treachery, used to describe someone who collaborates with an occupying enemy force. His story serves as a grim reminder of how ambition and opportunism can lead to betrayal on a national scale, with devastating consequences for both individuals and nations. Seventh is Andrei Vlasov. Andrei Vlasov stands out as one of the most controversial figures of World War II, a Soviet general whose betrayal of his homeland remains a deeply polarizing chapter in history. Once celebrated for his bravery and leadership on the battlefield, Vlasov's decision to side with Nazi Germany against the Soviet Union shocked his contemporaries and left an indelible mark on wartime narratives. Vlasov began his career as a loyal officer in the Red Army, rising through the ranks to become a trusted commander under Joseph Stalin. His leadership during the early stages of World War II earned him acclaim, particularly for his efforts in defending Moscow against the advancing German forces in 1941. However, his fortunes changed dramatically when he was captured by the Germans in 1942, during the Soviet defeat at the Battle of Leningrad. While in captivity, Vlasov became disillusioned with Stalin's oppressive regime, blaming the Soviet leadership for the suffering of both the military and civilian populations. Seizing an opportunity to oppose Stalin, Vlasov defected to the Germans and formed the Russian Liberation Army, ROA, composed of the Soviet prisoners of war who sought to fight against the USSR. The ROA aimed to overthrow Stalin's government and establish a new Russia free from communist rule. Vlasov's collaboration with Nazi Germany, however, was fraught with complexities. While he sought to liberate Russia, his alignment with the Nazis placed him in a morally and politically untenable position. The Germans, viewing the ROA with suspicion, limited its operations, using it primarily for propaganda purposes rather than granting it substantial military autonomy. By the time that ROA was deployed in combat, the war was nearing its end, and its impact was minimal. In 1945, as the war drew to a close, Vlasov and his forces attempted to surrender to the Western Allies, hoping to avoid Soviet retribution. Their efforts were in vain. Vlasov was captured by Soviet forces, tried for treason, and executed in 1946. Today, Andrei Vlasov remains a divisive figure. Some view him as a traitor who betrayed his country during its darkest hour, while others argue that he was a patriot who sought to free Russia from Stalin's tyranny. Regardless of interpretation, his story highlights the complexities of loyalty and ideology during times of war. Finally, Reinhard Gehlen. Reinhard Gehlen stands as one of the most controversial figures in the shadowy world of Cold War espionage. A high-ranking intelligence officer in Nazi Germany, Gehlen later played a pivotal role in shaping the intelligence apparatus of the post-war Western Bloc, blurring the lines between allegiance and pragmatism. During World War II, Gehlen served as head of the Wehrmacht's Foreign Armies East, a department responsible for gathering intelligence on the Soviet Union. His expertise in Soviet military strategy and his extensive network of informants made him a key figure in Nazi intelligence operations. However, as the war turned against Germany, Gehlen foresaw the collapse of the Third Reich and began preparing for his survival. In 1945, Gehlen orchestrated his surrender to the United States, offering his vast trove of intelligence on the Soviet Union in exchange for protection and a role in post-war intelligence. Recognizing the value of his knowledge in the emerging Cold War, the U.S. accepted his offer. Gehlen was instrumental in establishing the Gehlen Organization, a covert intelligence network designed to counter Soviet influence in Europe. Despite its utility, the Gehlen organization was not without controversy. Many of its operatives were former Nazis, raising ethical questions about the West's reliance on individuals with questionable pasts. Furthermore, the organization's heavy dependence on ex-Nazi personnel made it a target of criticism as it underscored the compromises made in the name of geopolitical strategy. In 1956, the Gehlen organization was absorbed into West Germany's Federal Intelligence Service, BND. With Gehlen serving as its first president, under his leadership, the BND became a cornerstone of Western intelligence efforts during the Cold War. However, Gehlen's tenure was marred by internal scandals and accusations of inefficiency, leading to his eventual retirement in 1968. Reinhard Gehlen's legacy remains deeply polarizing. While some view him as a pragmatic operator who adapted to shifting political realities, others see him as a symbol of the moral ambiguities of Cold War politics. His story highlights the uneasy alliances forged in the name of national security and the ethical compromises that often accompany such decisions. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration of history's most dangerous betrayers, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on notifications for more compelling historical stories. See you in the next video.